lot of teachers want to either fight for a sanctuary union resolution to protect their students, or high school teachers who are organizing around what do we do in the event of ICE at the door. I think if anything, it has been a very galvanizing moment.
We have on the show today Natasha Ullman, staff writer at Labor Notes, formerly at In These Times, a writer and organizer. She has also written for The Guardian, Truth Out, Rewire News, and Teen Vogue. Natasha, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I wanted to get you on because you have been writing a lot recently about the the immigrant justice movement and the labor movement, some interplay that can and should be happening there, and just generally the effect that the new administration is having on immigrants. So I guess, can we start there? What is happening right now within the immigrant community because of the Trump administration? Like, what's going on vis-a-vis like immigration enforcement? What is it doing to these communities and members of the community that are both immigrant and non-immigrant?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's no denying it's a scary moment. ICE appears to be ramping up enforcement sweeps. We're not perfectly sure since they're not disclosing numbers consistently, but what we are seeing are really public enforcement actions at work sites that put communities on edge, actions like transferring immigrants to Guantanamo Bay in total secrecy and with no accountability. And these sorts of actions are already having a really chilling effect. I've heard reports of people not picking up essential medications like insulin at the pharmacy or afraid to go to work because if they're picked up in a raid, who will pick up their kids from school? We're also seeing a lot of bad actors who are seizing on this moment to spread terror. I heard from one organizer that a photo circulating of an ICE van was actually photoshopped. So someone just took an ICE van and photoshopped it into a local grocery store parking lot to terrify people. And I've also personally seen someone screen cap a photo from an ICE raid that was 4 or 5 years ago and try to frame it as if it was this week. So we're absolutely seeing an escalation. But I think given this climate of fear, one thing I just want to foreground is that it's so vital we don't do ICE's work for them. You know, ICE wants to project far more strength than it has in hopes people will remove themselves from public life or self-deport. So a lot of organizers I'm talking to right now are saying spread power, not panic. You know, it can be really tempting if you see a social media post of an ICE raid to want to spread the word. But to whatever degree you can slow down, verify the information, see where you can plug in, it's really likely that there's already deportation defense networks in your area.
Right. How do you kind of hold those two things at the same time, like wanting to spread news about potential raids to try to protect people that you know, while also being cognizant of the fact that sometimes there's malicious and non-malicious misinformation going out there about this kind of stuff? What you know, if you mentioned, maybe take a beat and don't share that social media post right away. What other things should I be doing?
Yeah, I think tapping into the organizing that is already happening and long preceded the Trump administration is really important because there are folks who, have been in this fight and are building these sorts of networks, things like rapid response networks where if there's a deportation or even an ICE check-in, you can mobilize the community. I think seeing where the organizing already is because it's so likely that that's already happening in your community.
How should what can people do in the event that they are that they see an ICE raid or they are the target of an ICE raid? What are some kind of tips and best practices for interacting with ICE? We've seen coverage of Chicago and like Tom Homan really being upset that folks in Chicago know their rights. What are the kinds of things that folks across the country are doing to kind of protect themselves and their community?
Yeah, so if you're out, it's helpful if you can record, but before posting, verify with organizers, say, this is what I saw, here's the date, capture as much information as you can. But also, yeah, There are these existing networks of rapid response, often in a Signal group or WhatsApp, that you can get plugged into, and folks can share information in a way that is, responsible and safe. And
Gotcha. Gotcha.
also, I should say, Arise Chicago has put together a really useful Know Your Rights in the context of, for workers in particular, worksite enforcement and also like contingency plans. What should I do if I need to make plans for my kids, if I'm caught up in a array of things in that vein? So I would suggest checking out that resource as well.
Why should why should non-immigrant workers be concerned about this sort of indiscriminate kind of mass deportation stuff potentially happening in their communities? Like, why should a native U.S. born worker care about what ICE does or doesn't do?
Yeah, I think that whether you're a citizen or not, however you feel about immigration, as working people, we all have stakes in this fight. There's a common notion that immigrants drive down wages, but I think that argument misses something that's really important, and that's that the boss can only pay this worker less because of their immigration status, because
Hmm.
that vulnerability that hangs over these workers' heads and forces them to settle for less. And that's bad for all of us. This sort of division, like, really only serves the boss because let's be real, it's not the immigrant worker saying, please, please pay me less. It's the boss choosing to take advantage of a person in a vulnerable position and hoping that you'll be too mad at the immigrant to get mad at him. So honestly, this divide and conquer stuff has been part of the boss's playbook for as long as there's been a boss's playbook.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Right, right. And there was a really good article. It's been from a few years ago, but there was a good article in Catalyst that kind of surveyed some of the literature around immigrants' effects on wages. And there's, like you said, there's kind of dispute about that. There are some people that say that it has no effect. I think that a lot of people have difficulty kind of buying that argument. But even the kind of nativist conservative, worst case scenario is a 2 to 5% reduction in wages in a similar kind of community or industry. And guess what? Unionization increases wages by 10 to 14%. And if you look in, immediate communities and immediate industries, you can see as much as a 50% wage premium on unionization. So, if that kind of brings us to, the answer that we have had on this program for as long as we've been doing the show, which is that we shouldn't be trying to advocate for the removal of these types of people from our community. We should be looking for increased integration into the community, up to and very much including specifically integration into the labor movement and giving them the power to organize for better wages and working conditions for themselves, their families, and their communities. And so how are you seeing unions across the country react to these attacks on undocumented workers that may or may not be members of their unions or the labor movement? But how are unions responding across the country?
Yeah, so there's a lot the labor movement can do in this moment to stand with our immigrant brothers and sisters. I mean, first, just to say, if you're not in a union, organizing your workplace is one of the most crucial things you can do in this moment, because a strong fighting labor movement is one of the most powerful tools to win social justice, whether immigrant justice, justice for our trans brothers and sisters, and beyond. So if you don't know where to start, I suggest reaching out to EWOC, the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. They can hook you up with an organizer who can talk you through the process. But more broadly, there's quite a bit that the labor movement can do. First, of course, there's Know Your Rights trainings. The Painters Union has been really active around this. There's a lot of misconceptions out there, like immigrant workers can't join unions, or you don't have to pay them overtime. And that stuff hurts all of us because it sinks down standards lower, pits us against each other in a race to the bottom, and, lets the boss immediately cudgel you with that, right? If I'm paying this person less, why should I pay you more? So correcting misinformation and, knowing what to do in the event of an enforcement action is really essential in this moment. And again, Arise Chicago has an immigrant worker toolkit that's full of great information. But there's also things like rapid response deportation defense. Escucha Mi Voz is a faith-based labor organization in Iowa, and they make it a point to mobilize the community when someone is called into an ICE check-in. Just, oh, this person has a check-in Saturday morning, who can come out? And they found that if there's a large group of community supporters present, ICE will actually very rarely move forward with deportation proceedings as a safety issue for their agents. But in
Mm,
addition to that, they've committed to something that I think is really powerful and important. They have committed to having 6,000 one-on-one conversations within their communities. And something I think is really cool is that the way they talk about it actually sounds a lot like an organizing campaign, like face-to-face one-on-ones about immigration, engaging with people who don't agree with us in good faith, and over time, looking to bring them into the movement. There are also, sanctuary union resolutions. The National Union of Healthcare Workers made a sanctuary union pledge in 2017 and reaffirmed it a few days ago, in which they pledge to not voluntarily cooperate with federal agents or enforce immigration laws. And if that's something that you want to pursue for your own union, we've got some sample resolutions on our website at Labor Notes and at Workday Magazine, or folks can reach out to me anytime to talk about it. And finally, there is good contract language. So the Chicago Teachers Union has one language saying that you don't have to let ICE through the door unless they have a signed warrant, which they
mm,
basically never do. So that said, a CTU teacher made a really important point as we were talking about it. She said, you can win all the best contract language in the world, but if you and everyone else don't know your contract, who's going to be the person to tell ICE, no, you can't come in, we don't have to let you? So making sure you and everyone you know are informed about what you won is also just as essential. But there's some other really good language out there. Some UE locals have won good language around employment verification audits, requiring that workers get several months' notice ahead of time. And if they can't produce the right documentation, they get 4 months within which to present that. And after that, you can get another 20 months for rehire with full seniority. So, there's a lot of important protections that can be won in a contract. And again, we all have stakes in this fight, because if the boss
mm.
can treat a worker worse, even if it's in a way that doesn't apply to you as a citizen, he's still setting a precedent of lowering standards because he can get away with it. And that is really bad for all of us.
Right.
So at Labor Notes and Workday, we put together the best contract language we could find around protecting immigrant members, and just like a guide that reiterates a lot of this information. So you can find it on both of our sites.
Workday Magazine is a really cool publication covering labor in the Midwest. Folks should definitely check it out. I can't remember the website, but if you Google Workday Magazine, it'll come up. And so those are some of the, some best practices and some of the things that, a few unions are doing that you think are good in response to this sort of attack on immigrants and our immigrant members and our immigrant communities. How would you characterize the response of the labor movement writ large to this increase in nativist and anti-immigrant rhetoric? I've seen some people feel disappointed with the response from the labor movement so far, but from where I am, it seems mostly like the labor movement is at least saying the right things and encouraging their affiliates to do the right things. I think with the market exception of Teamsters president Sean O'Brien. But I don't know. It seems to me, other than that most of the rhetoric around it has been at least good. But how do you see it from where you're sitting?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are really springing to action in this moment. I'm hearing from a lot of teachers who want to either, fight for a sanctuary union resolution to protect their students, or, high school teachers who are organizing around what do we do in the event of ICE at the door. So I think if anything, it has for many people been a very galvanizing moment. I do think, yeah, Sean O'Brien is the big unfortunate exception. And my colleague Luis Feliz Leon wrote a really fantastic piece in N+1 this week, just kind of examining those failures.
Right. Yeah, the piece is called Solidarity in Retreat. It's really good. and like you said, it's an N+1 magazine. And your piece that you wrote with Sarah Lazaire is titled "How Labor Can Fight Back Against Trump's Mass Deportation Agenda." So really appreciate your work on those. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.